The storm had been raging for 3 days when Marcus Kane first heard the crash. Lightning split the sky above his remote atmospheric research station, illuminating the dense forest that stretched endlessly in every direction. He'd chosen this isolated location on the frontier planet of Kepler 44 to be specifically for its solitude. No cities, no colonies, just him and his scientific instruments. Measuring weather patterns for the Terran Survey Corps, the metallic screech that echoed through the valley was unlike anything in nature. Marcus grabbed his emergency kit and rained gear, instinct overriding caution. Years as a combat medic had taught him to run toward danger, not away from it. Whatever had crashed out there might have survivors who needed help. The wreckage was scattered across a clearing 2 kilometers from his station. Twisted metal gleamed dully in the rain, and strange symbols were etched along what remained of the hull. This wasn't human technology. Marcus approached cautiously, his medic's training warring with first contact protocols he'd studied but never expected to use. A weak sound, part gasp, part growl, drew his attention to a figure pinned beneath a section of debris. Breath caught. The being was humanoid, but distinctly alien, with bronze skin that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. Her hand, somehow he knew it was female armor, was cracked and bloodied, revealing lean muscle beneath. Most striking were her eyes, a deep violet that fixed on him with fierce intelligence, despite her obvious pain. She spoke in a language of clicking consonants and flowing vowels, her tone defensive despite her vulnerability. Marcus raised his hands slowly, using the universal gesture for peace. "Easy," he said softly. "I'm here to help." The alien warrior for warrior she clearly was, judging by her scarred hands and battle-worn armor, tensed as he approached. When he knelt beside the debris pinning her legs, she hissed and tried to push him away with surprising strength. Her efforts only caused more blood to seep from a deep gash across her torso. "Stop fighting me," Marcus said, though he knew she couldn't understand. He began examining her injuries with professional efficiency. The leg appeared broken, but not compound. More concerning was the puncture wound in her side, already showing signs of infection from some kind of toxin. Working quickly, Marcus administered a broad-spectrum antibiotic and pain reliever from his kit. The alien's eyes widened as the medicine took effect, her rigid posture relaxing slightly. She watched him with keen attention as he splinted her leg and cleaned the wound on her torso, occasionally wincing but never crying out. The rain was getting worse, and hypothermia would kill her as surely as her injuries. Marcus made a decision that would change both their lives. Despite her weakening protests, he carefully lifted her in his arms. She was lighter than expected, but solid with corded muscle. Her head fell against his shoulder as consciousness began to slip away. "Stay with me," he whispered, carrying her through the storm toward his station. Lightning illuminated her face, proud. Even in unconsciousness, with high cheekbones and skin that seemed to pulse with faint bioluminescence, whatever world she came from, whatever brought her here, she was now his responsibility as he reached his station's medical bay. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this moment would be remembered as the night everything changed, not just for him, but perhaps for the future of 2 very different species, learning to trust each other across the vast darkness between stars. 3 days passed before Zephyr Marcus had begun calling her after she'd repeatedly touched her chest while saying what sounded like. Zephyr finally allowed him to approach without reaching for the makeshift weapon she'd fashioned from a broken medical instrument. Her recovery was remarkable. Whatever genetic advantages her species possessed included accelerated healing that put human physiology to shame. Marcus had converted his small laboratory into a recovery room, moving his atmospheric sensors to make space for a proper bed. He'd also begun learning her language through necessity. She would point to objects and speak their names in her musical tongue, while he did the same in standard Terran. Progress was slow but steady, punctuated by moments of frustrated gestures and careful sketches on his tablet. Through their primitive communication system, he learned she was indeed a warrior, a Kethmoran in her language, which seemed to mean something like sky hunter. The drawings she made showed sleek figures pursuing winged creatures through mountain peaks. Her people, the Skyloth, lived in aerial cities among the clouds of their homeworld. "How did you get here?" Marcus asked one morning, sketching a rough star map. Zephora studied it with intense focus, then drew her own version, one that showed trajectories and what looked like pursuit routes. She'd been running from something, or someone. Their quiet routine was shattered on the fourth day when another craft landed outside the station. Unlike Zephora's crashed vessel, this one touched down with mechanical precision. Marcus watched through his monitors as a tall, lean figure emerged, another alien, this one male, with the same bronze-tinted skin but darker coloring and more angular features. Zephora tensed the moment she saw him on the screen, her hand instinctively moving to where her weapons would normally hang. She spoke rapidly in her native tongue, a stream of urgent words that sounded like warnings. The newcomer, who called himself Torvin, approached the station with military bearing. When Marcus activated the external speakers, Torvin spoke in heavily accented but understandable Standard Terran. "Human, you harbor Kethmorin, Zephora, of the Windwalker clan. By tribal law, she must return for judgment." Marcus felt Zephora's hand grip his arm tightly. Her violet eyes were wide with something that looked like fear, the first time he'd seen such an expression on her fierce features. Whatever judgment awaited her among her own people, she clearly dreaded it. "Injured," Marcus replied, through the speaker. "She needs more time to recover. The High Matriarch has declared her wounds healed enough for transport." Torvin responded coldly. "You will release her now or face consequences." But when Marcus turned to Zephora, she shook her head violently. In broken Standard Terran she'd been practicing, she managed. "No go. Stay. Stay with Marcus Healer." Her pronunciation was careful, deliberate, and the trust in her voice made his chest tighten. The standoff continued through the day. Torvin made camp outside the station, his presence a constant reminder that Zephora's peaceful recovery was ending. As night fell, she sat beside Marcus at his small table, attempting to explain through drawings and gestures what awaited her. Return. The sketches she drew showed a tribunal of stern figures, chains, and what looked like exile. She'd apparently violated some tribal law during her hunt, and only Marcus's intervention had saved her from a fate worse than death dishonor. Among her warrior people, "I won't let them take you," Marcus said quietly, though he wasn't sure how he could stop them. Zephora looked at him with those remarkable violet eyes, and for the first time since he'd found her, she smiled. It transformed her entire face, revealing a warmth that her warrior's exterior had hidden. "In halting Standard Terran," she replied. "Marcus Healer brave, but Skyloth law... very strong." Outside, storm clouds were gathering again, and Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow would bring more than just Torvin's demands. Something larger was coming. He could feel it in the way Zephora kept, glancing at the sky as if expecting the very heavens to open and reveal her fate. The morning brought clear skies and the low rumble of multiple aircraft approaching from the north. Marcus watched through his station's observation deck as 3 sleek vessels descended in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming like polished bronze in the dawn light. These weren't the desperate crash landing of Zephora's damaged ship or Torvin's functional but modest craft. These radiated power and authority. Zephora stood beside him, her posture straight and proud despite the anxiety Marcus could sense radiating from her. She'd insisted on wearing her repaired armor, though the makeshift patches and sealed tears told the story of her ordeal. "High Matriarch Vesa comes," she said in careful Standard Terran. "Very important person." The lead vessel's boarding ramp descended with ceremonial precision, and Marcus felt his breath catch. The figure who emerged commanded attention simply by existing. High Matriarch Vesa was tall, even by Skyloth standards, her bronze skin bearing intricate scarification that spoke of rank and accomplishment. Her armor was more ornate than Zephora's, incorporating what looked like actual precious metals, and her violet eyes held the weight of absolute authority. Behind her came a contingent of warriors, including a massive male whose presence made even Torvin seemed diminutive. This had to be Captain Jackson, the tribe's war leader based on Zephora's earlier descriptions. His scarred hands rested casually on weapons that looked capable of cutting through Marcus's station walls. "Human Marcus Kane," Vessa's voice carried clearly across the clearing.
It's
Her standard Terran, flawless, and accented with musical inflections.
no.
"You have interfered with tribal justice by harboring a condemned warrior." Marcus stepped forward, feeling absurdly small, but refusing to show intimidation. "I provided medical aid to someone who was dying. It's not interference, it's basic decency." Vessa's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "You speak of decency too. A people you do not understand." Zephyra of the Windwalker clan violated sacred hunting grounds and led sacred prey to their deaths through carelessness. The penalty is exile and marking as outcast. "She was hunting dangerous creatures," Marcus protested. "The drawings she showed me, the Cathara she pursued, were not prey," Captain Jackson interrupted, his voice like grinding stone. "They were sacred guardians of the storm peaks. Her reckless pursuit caused their deaths and brought shame to her lineage." Zephyra stepped forward then, speaking rapidly in her native tongue. Her words were formal, ritualistic, but Marcus caught enough familiar sounds to understand she was making some kind of formal declaration. The assembled warriors shifted uncomfortably, and even Vessa's composed mask cracked slightly. "What did she say?" Marcus demanded. Vessa turned her penetrating gaze on him. "She invokes Keth Valor, the life debt bond. By saving her life when death was certain, you have become bound to her fate under our most ancient laws." The weight of her words settled over the clearing like a physical force. Marcus felt the eyes of every warrior upon him, measuring, judging.
What does that mean?
"Exactly. It means," Vessa said slowly, "that her crimes are now shared with you. Her punishment becomes yours to bear, but also ... She paused, and for the first time, something like approval entered her expression. "It means you have the right to speak for her before the tribal council." Captain Jackson growled something in their language that sounded like protest, but Vessa silenced him with a gesture. "The law is clear, old friend. This human has bound himself to one of our own through deed and sacrifice. We cannot ignore ancient customs simply because they are inconvenient." Marcus looked at Zephyra, who met his gaze steadily. In her violet eyes, he saw gratitude, hope, and something deeper, a connection forged in trust and shared danger. She'd basically just made him responsible for her fate, and somehow he wasn't angry about it. "When do we leave?" he asked. Vessa's lips curved in what might have been a smile immediately. "The council convenes with the next moon cycle, and the journey to our sky city takes 3 days." She gestured to her warriors. "Prepare quarters for our newest tribal advocate." As the Skyloth began making preparations for departure, Marcus realized his quiet life of atmospheric research had just ended. In its place waited something far more dangerous and uncertain, but as Zephyra touched his arm in silent thanks,
Ow.
he found he was looking forward to whatever came next. The sky city of Ethros defied every engineering principle Marcus thought he understood. Floating platforms connected by graceful bridges stretched across 3 levels of cloud-wreathed architecture, all suspended impossibly in the upper atmosphere, by technology that hummed with barely contained energy. The Skyloth moved through this aerial maze with the confidence of those born to fly, while Marcus tried not to look down through the translucent walkways at the planet's surface kilometers below. The council chamber occupied the highest platform. Its walls opened to the sky and decorated with banners that rippled in the constant wind. High Matriarch Vessa presided from a throne carved from what looked like crystallized cloud, while the assembled tribal leaders formed a semicircle around the judgment floor. Marcus stood beside Zephyra, acutely aware that every eye in the chamber was fixed on him with mixtures of curiosity, skepticism, and outright hostility. "The human has invoked Keth Valor," Vessa announced, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "By law, he shares the accused's fate and may speak in her defense." Marcus had spent the 3-day journey preparing for this moment, learning what he could of Skyloth customs and law from Zephyra and the more sympathetic warriors. What he hadn't expected was the intervention of Priestess Nith, an ancient female whose skin bore so many ritual scars it resembled intricate lacework. The life debt creates more than shared fate, Nith declared, rising from her position among the spiritual advisors. Ancient law states that one who saves a warrior's life in mortal combat becomes eligible for Kithvantel, the mating bond. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Captain Jackson rose from his seat, his scarred face twisted with displeasure. You cannot seriously propose that this soft-skinned outsider could be worthy of bonding with a Kethmoran warrior. The law does not distinguish between worthy and unworthy, Nith replied calmly. It recognizes only deed and consequence. The human preserved life when death was certain. The ancient texts are clear about what this means. Marcus felt Zephyra stiffen beside him. Through their growing communication, she'd explained the basics of Skyloth mating customs, a ritual trial system designed to ensure only the strongest warriors could claim mates from their aerial society. It was apparently both an honor and a terrifying prospect. What exactly does this mating bond involve? Marcus asked, drawing surprised looks from the assembly. Apparently, most advocates didn't question the process quite so directly. High Matriarch. Bess's eyes gleamed with something that might have been amusement. 3 trials, human. Combat against a chosen champion to prove your warrior's heart. Survival in the sacred storm peaks to prove your connection to our sky realm. And finally, the ritual of spirit joining to prove your compatibility with the one you seek to claim. A new voice cut through the chamber deep, challenging and filled with contempt. I volunteer as combat champion. The speaker was Drakthor, a warrior Marcus had noticed during the journey for his obvious hostility toward humans in general, and Marcus in particular. He was built like a siege engine, all corded muscle and battle scars, with the kind of presence that made seasoned fighters step aside. His violet eyes fixed on Marcus with predatory intensity. The trials are not mandatory, Vesa continued, though her tone suggested she expected Marcus to accept. You may choose exile with the accused. Instead, many would consider it the wiser path. Marcus looked at Zephyra, who met his gaze steadily. In her violet eyes, he saw not expectation or demand, but simple trust. She would accept whatever choice he made without judgment. Duh. The realization hit him like a physical blow somewhere between. The crash site, in this moment, he'd fallen completely and irrevocably in love with this fierce alien warrior. I accept the trials, he said firmly. The chamber fell silent except for the constant whisper of wind through the open walls. Even Drakthor looked surprised by the speed of his decision. Very well, Vesa declared. The trials will commence tomorrow. At dawn, Drakthar will serve as combat champion, the Storm Peaks will test your survival, and Priestess Nith will conduct the spirit joining. May the Skywinds judge you worthy Marcus Kane of Earth. That evening, as Marcus prepared for what might be his final night alive, Zephyra sat beside him on the platform assigned to visiting advocates. The city lights twinkled below them like earthbound stars, and the wind carried the scent of rain and ozone. You don't have to do this, she said in careful standard Terran, her improving language skills making conversation easier. Exile is not death. Marcus turned to study her profile against the starlit sky. Would you be happy in exile? Her silence was answer enough. Zephyra was a warrior born, bred for sky cities and aerial hunts. Exile would destroy her as surely as any blade. Then I guess I'd better not lose tomorrow, he said with more confidence than he felt. When she smiled at him, that transforming expression he'd come to treasure, Marcus knew that whatever the trials brought, he'd made the right choice. 20 years later, Marcus Kane stood on the observation deck of the diplomatic station orbiting Kepler 44b, watching as the latest batch of cultural exchange students prepared for their journey between worlds.
Ow.
The irony wasn't lost on him that the remote planet where he'd once sought solitude had become the primary hub for human-Skyloth relations. Father, the delegation from New Geneva is requesting final approval for the atmospheric mining protocols, came a voice from behind him. Marcus turned to see his eldest son, Skylar, approaching with a data tablet. At 19, the young man perfectly embodied the fusion of both species. His father's human height and build combined with his mother's luminescent bronze skin and violet eyes that seemed to hold depths of sky. What does your mother think of their proposal? Marcus asked, accepting the tablet. She's concerned about the impact on native wind patterns. Skylar replied in the fluid bilingual mix that had become common among the hybrid children. The Skylith Council wants additional environmental safeguards. Through the observation deck's windows, Marcus could see Zephora leading a group of young pilots through aerial maneuvers around the station's docking rings. Even after 2 decades of marriage and 3 children, she moved through the sky with the same lethal grace that had first captured his attention in that forest clearing. Her role as chief cultural liaison suited her perfectly, bridging the gap between human engineering and Skyloth intuition. The trials that had nearly killed him seemed like ancient history now. Drakthor had proven a worthy opponent, testing every combat skill Marcus had learned during his military service. But the Skyloth warrior had been unprepared for human adaptability and desperate creativity. The survival trial in the Storm Peaks had nearly broken him. But Zephyr's teachings about reading wind patterns and finding shelter in aerial currents had seen him through. The spirit-joining ritual remained deeply personal, a memory he shared only with his wife, the moment when Priestess Nith had guided their minds into communion, and they'd truly understood each other across the species divide. Father? Skylar's voice brought him back to the present. There's also a message from Luna Station. They're reporting another unidentified craft entering the outer system. Marcus nodded, unsurprised. In the years since first contact, word had spread through both human and alien networks about the successful integration on Kepler 4-4b. Representatives from dozens of species now came seeking mediation,
Oh, yes.
trade agreements, or simply to study how 2 very different peoples had learned to coexist. The observation deck's doors whispered open, and Zephora entered with their twin daughters, Terra and Aura, at 15. The girls were already showing signs of becoming exceptional pilots, inheriting their mother's aerial instincts and their father's analytical mind. They chattered excitedly about their upcoming assignment to Earth's Luna City as part of the youth exchange program. The atmospheric mining proposal needs revision, Zephora announced without preamble, settling beside Marcus with the casual intimacy of long partnership. The humans understand efficiency, but not harmony. Their extraction methods will disrupt weather patterns for generations. Suggestions? Marcus asked, though he already knew she'd have a comprehensive alternative ready. Instead of answering immediately, Zephyr looked out at the swirling clouds of their adopted homeworld. Sometimes I think about that first night, she said quietly. When you carried me through the storm to your little station, did you ever imagine it would lead to all this? Marcus followed her gaze, taking in the bustling traffic of ships representing a dozen different species. The research platforms studying everything from atmospheric dynamics to cultural anthropology. The family Suman Skyloth and hybrid making lives together among the clouds and continents below. I was just trying to save someone who was hurt, he replied honestly. I never thought about changing the future of 2 civilizations. Terra, their youngest, looked up from her study tablet with the solemn expression she'd inherited from her. Mother, Grandmother Vessa says that's what makes you worthy of the life bond, she said in careful standard Terran. You helped because it was right, not because you wanted reward. Ara nodded agreement, adding in Skyloth, the best bridges are built by those who simply offer their hand to someone who needs help crossing. High Matriarch Vessa, now in her 70s but still formidable, had become an unexpected grandmother figure to their children. Her initial skepticism about the human Skylith union had transformed into proud advocacy. When she saw how their hybrid offspring combined the best traits of both species, the mining proposal, Skylar reminded them gently. New Geneva is waiting for our response. Zephira smiled, the same expression that had first made Marcus's heart skip decades ago. We counterpropose a joint atmospheric management system, human technology guided by Skyloth environmental wisdom. Instead of extraction, we teach them to work with the planet's natural patterns. And if they refuse? Marcus asked. Then they find another world to strip mine, Zephora replied firmly. Kepler 4-2b is under our joint protection now. Proven that cooperation creates more than exploitation ever could. As if summoned by their conversation, the communication system chimed with an incoming message from Earth's diplomatic corps. The holographic display showed. Ambassador Chuno. Relation to the Dr. Chen that Marcus had never met, looking pleased but harried. Marcus Sephora, the ambassador began. We've received formal requests from 6 new species wanting to establish cultural exchange programs based on your model. The Galactic Assembly is calling Kepler-4 to be the template for future interspecies relations. Marcus felt Zephyra's hand slip into his, her luminescent skin warm against his palm. Their children gathered around the display, eager to hear about potential new friends and challenges. Through the observation windows, the sun was setting over their adopted world, painting the clouds in shades of gold and crimson that reminded him of the first storm he'd carried Zephora through. Tell them we're ready, Marcus replied. All we've had plenty of practice building bridges between different worlds. As the ambassador signed off, and the family began discussing plans for welcoming new species to their diplomatic haven, Marcus reflected on the strange path that had led from a crashed ship in a forest clearing to this moment. He'd set out to study atmospheric patterns, and ended up studying something far more complex and rewarding, the patterns of the heart that could connect any two beings willing to reach across the void between their worlds. The future stretched ahead like an uncharted sky, full of possibilities for those brave enough to spread their wings and fly toward understanding.